All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending I think it's like the seventh installment of the Empower Hour. So when we went on virtual shutdown hiatus, whatever, Devin had an idea that we would do some social events, and that once a month that we would do something educational, and that's taken the idea from like seminars and presentations to what we've really found out that we like is panel discussions. So I'm going to introduce the panelists. I'm just the moderator, so you were not going to hear me too much. Hold your applause. We've got Coach Devin Lopez. As you know, I'll let him kind of briefly talk about towards the end what he knows about recovery. Chiropractor extraordinaire Dino Del Mastro. I'll go ahead and let you talk a little bit about what you do and how you were involved. Go for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So originally I knew Coach Devin Lopez and also Lucia from doing CrossFit at a CrossFit box in Los Gatos. And I've been practicing as a chiropractor here in town for the past 11 years now. And pretty much my meat and potatoes of what I work with every day are what I put in the category of weekend warriors. So probably the average person that stops by my office is someone who's just like any of us sitting here right now, someone who has, their regular day job, but then they have ambitious physical goals. And, there's going to be some speed bumps along the way, both with recovery and injuries. And that's what I like to help people with. So I'm happy that, Coach Devin invited me to come back on here today and share a little bit as a group with, what I've learned over the years and how I can be of assistance to people.
Cool. And we also have Lucia Galindo, who is holistic wellness coach, yoga instructor, yoga teacher, yoga lifestyle practitioner. In addition to being a manager of is it a sports and spine clinic? Is that correct?
Physical medicine and rehab.
Yeah, but I'll let her not butcher it like I would. So,
no, that's great. So yes, all of what he said is true. I've been working in the medical field for almost 18 years. And right now I'm working at a clinic called Rehab One, where we work with people who have gotten injured, and we rehab them back to wellness. And in most instances, we're working with people who have gotten injured on their jobs. So our goal is to get them back to function so they can go back to work, go back to their lives. So in that capacity, I work as director of operations for them. And then outside of that, as Lance alluded to, I also am in the world of fitness. So I teach as a personal trainer some fitness classes, but as a registered yoga teacher, I also teach yoga, different varieties of yoga. And so I kind of put everything together to create this tool bag of various tools to help clients when I work with them one-on-one or in a public setting. And I know Coach Devin also from CrossFit of Los Gatos. He was and always is going to be my favorite coach. Thanks, Coach.
Beautiful. Devin, do you want to introduce yourself for those who may not actually know you, who might be watching this recorded somewhere else?
Sure. My name is Devin Lopez. I've been the head coach at CrossFit San Jose for quite a while now, but I've been involved in CrossFit and personal training for about 13, 14 years now. So spent some time as an athlete. So I've put a lot of focus on learning how to recover better for better performance and quicker adaptation. So have a little bit of insight into what goes into this stuff, but I also have a nutritional certification as well that gives me a little bit of that edge from a nutritional standpoint too. So, but yeah, that is me.
Well, we are here tonight to talk about the topic of recovery. So let's go ahead and start with our first guest, Dino. What is recovery?
Yeah, sure. So when it comes to recovery, it's important to talk a little bit about, what came first here, the chicken or the egg. And in this case, we need recovery as a response to physical stress on the body. Now, when it comes to physical stress, I want everyone to think about a couple of different scenarios, whether it was your first open workout, your first benchmark workout, or if you're new to CrossFit, lifting weights in general, just your first really hard workout. You have coach encouraging you, people around you are pushing. right away you notice that your heart rate going up, you're starting to sweat, your breathing is going to increase. All of these are good things. These are all necessary things for us to overload our body to the point where we can make gains, where we can get these PRs, where we can see improvement. Now, the higher level of intensity, so the higher that we spike these, what we call regulatory systems, which are going to be our breathing, our respiratory, our cardiovascular, our temperature regulations, the harder and the longer that we spike these, the more important recovery becomes in order to let our bodies fully heal themselves, so that we can grow stronger and that we can reach these kind of greater heights and our goals as we go down the road. So recovery is always going to be secondary to our physical stress. And once again, it's important to remember that the harder, the higher level of intensity, and the longer that we work out, the more important that recovery does become.
Anyone else would like to add to that?
I like to think of recovery as just as essential as a rigorous workout. I like to think, when I think of recovery, I like to think of it as giving your body sort of a break. Your body needs to return back to homeostasis, as Dino mentioned. And so by allowing the body to do that, we come back stronger. We come back with a greater ability to endure these rigorous workouts, right? So I like to think about it as almost like a homeostasis, like coming back to balance, in a nutshell, really simply.
Thank you. You know what, that does lead us to the, Devin, were you going to say something?
No, I thought that was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah. It leads us to a question that we get asked a lot, like, what's the difference between active recovery and rest days? Like, is rest recovery?
So I'll start that one off. I feel like this is, for some reason too, in the CrossFit realm, there seems to be a lot of people that like to prescribe to active recovery days versus just a rest day, simply put. So it's kind of good to first just like define the two terms. Active recovery usually refers to like a light workout day where you're just simply trying to provide some blood flow through the body to help facilitate a little bit faster recovery. A rest day, pretty obviously, you're just taking no exercise or doing no exercise in order to give your body, full time to devote to recovery processes during that time. So not that an active recovery day is inherently a bad thing, but I think what a lot of people do poorly is they structure them wrong, and they do end up doing too much work, and they don't get the benefits of the recovery at the same time. So you actually end up adding too much fatigue to the body. And usually it's not enough to even have any actual benefit from an adaptational standpoint. So you kind of get lost in this nomad's land of doing work that doesn't really give you anything. And certainly as it applies to trying to actively recover, you're not actually recovering. So, it takes a little bit of knowledge to know how to construct a recovery day in a way that's going to actually allow you to recover while kind of achieving that goal. So what I usually would just say to most people is recover. Just simply take the day off if your goal is to recover, and try not to confuse it or complicate it by trying to do more things and potentially, adding to more fatigue rather than, less fatigue. So, but yeah, don't make it tough. Just let the body heal. Most people, that's going to be perfect.
Just to add to what Coach Devin mentioned there, one of the biggest things when it comes to should I do an active recovery day versus just a straight up rest day is really being able to look at yourself in the mirror, or have your coach give you advice on, are you able to come in and do an active recovery day at the gym? Or are you someone who's going to get there, and even if you feel like you beat your body to death in a workout the day before, you're going to come in, you're going to start off slow. The person next to you is going to start putting 10 pounds on. You're going to put 10 pounds on. And before you know it, you're lifting the same weight that you did yesterday. So I think a big part of active recovery versus rest is also knowing yourself. And, if you're in a coach's position, knowing your athlete and knowing when to tell them, hey, you know what, you just got to stay home today. I don't even want you to look at a barbell, because I know you're not going to be able to go light and actually recover. You're just going to push. So really understanding yourself is important when it comes to active recovery versus rest.
I agree fully with that. I'm a huge proponent of active recovery. I feel that even in my own practice, in my own life, doing too much of any one thing for me in my life and for many of my clients, never really translates into good optimal fitness and a well-rounded athlete, right? So I feel that in order to also become more well-rounded, you can create these recovery days and become maybe more mobile, right? And that's kind of the game when we're talking about recovery. Maybe you're considering your recovery day or your rest day as just a waste of your workout. But when you realize the importance of that, you realize that when you come back to the things that you're really passionate about, like lifting weights or gymnastics or running or hiking or whatever the case might be, you come back rested. So I think active recovery in my life really works better than just straight up rest. I feel that rest can be really useful in terms of acute injuries and things like that. But for the most part, I really am a big proponent of active recovery.
As long as it's not one of your yoga classes.
Depends on the yoga. If it's a yin class, absolutely. But yeah, like a power yoga handstand class, not going to be ideal for an active recovery. Absolutely. No.
Anything that has the word hot or ends with Pilates, probably stay away from.
Yeah.
So the other one too is like, so there was some fairly intricate stuff, and I feel like you guys had a very good idea. I think that some of us probably still walk away going like, I don't get it. Rest versus recovery. And we'll talk about like what happens when we don't recover at the end. But would you say for someone who doesn't know themselves, is it better to err on the side of resting as opposed, like, are you gonna get more from resting than you might not get from like missing an active recovery day? I mean, I think people focus on the science and they're like, oh, active recovery is the way to go.
Well, yeah, I think Dino said is perfect, right? It's getting to know your body. And I hopefully we'll be able to get to more of that later. But once you understand your body, and it's just like riding a bike for the first time, you know, you start riding a bike and you're kind of like, oh my God, this is a little sketchy, but the more you do it, the better you get. And it's the same thing, like scanning your body, getting to know your body. You start to see these signs and symptoms of fatigue. Your sleep is starting to feel a little deprived, and you start to see these little things. And before they become big things, yeah, resting, erring on the side of caution is always going to be a better idea. If you know, like Dino said, you can't, like an active recovery day for you is like hiking 8 miles. Better to err on the side of caution and just rest. Oh, Dino's dark.
Motion sensors in here. I got to move every couple minutes. The lights will go off.
Nice.
Well, that lends right to another question. Like, is there I mean, obviously we're general. So the whole idea of CrossFit is the not to be a fringe athlete and specialized in any one thing. And I'm sure like a weightlifter may recover in a different way than a sprinter might, in a different way than a marathoner would. So is there a general type of recovery that we should all be doing, or are they very specific, and does one type of recovery screw up the performance of another skill or attribute?
Yeah, so Lance, that's a great question. And I think the answer to that is there are so many. I mean, I think later on we have a question that we're going to talk about that's going to be, different ways to recover. There's a million different ways that we could go about a recovery. For me personally, keeping it simple, and also I'm big on multitasking. I'm big on killing 2 birds with 1 stone. If on my active recovery days, I can work on some technique, that's fantastic. Now, once again, knowing myself, I remember Coach Devin used to have a class where we would go in and it was strictly technique days. And it was almost, you were using a dowel rod or a barbell for the majority of that class. Now, what that's going to do, that's going to help fuel my performance for both future workouts. That's going to polish and sharpen all my skills, but I'm also getting my body to move through a full range of motion and utilizing all the smaller stabilizing muscles that I might not be thinking about, might not be keeping in mind when I'm pushing really hard, trying to get those PRs and trying to hit those benchmark workouts. Now, just to piggyback on that, I'm really big on some of the real basics in addition to the technique. Some of the most common things that we see in the gyms: foam rollers, cross balls, tennis balls, bands of stretch. So these are all different ways that we can help our bodies recover, and keeping it kind of cheap and simple, using things like foam rolling and bands to help stretch, I think in addition to technique are of the most value of any types of tool you can get, because you can go off the deep end and spend lots of money on fun, fancy toys, and they all help. But in addition to working on your technique, doing some basic foam rolling and stretching can go a long, long way for your recovery.
Cool. Why don't we jump right into our next question? We actually did have someone that asked about, like, what are the specific benefits of mobility or myofascial release or stretching as it relates to recovery, as it relates to getting better at your exercise coming up?
I think that this is a really good question. The benefits of, well, I think that the main benefit of mobility work in recovery is that it realigns the tissue, right, within the muscle, and the connective tendons. So ultimately what we're doing by mobilizing the joints, because when we think of mobility, it's really important that you don't confuse mobility with flexibility, right? There are these two words, and oftentimes we find them interchangeable, but they're not. Mobility is, think joints, right? You want to think range of motion within the joint, whereas flexibility is going to focus more on the muscle, right? So think the mobility is active, whereas the flexibility is passive, right? So when we think about what would be one of the biggest benefits of mobility, of flexibility, it's going to be injury prevention, in my opinion. And I've unfortunately learned that the hardest way possible is through injuries and surgeries. I feel that something that oftentimes, like Dino said, is unbelievably therapeutic in our recovery is using tools like a foam roller, right? You develop these adhesions on the muscle, and if you can get to them right away, if you can start to realize that by not getting to these muscles, when they start to feel overly overworked, over fatigued, you're going to have muscle compensation. And what does that do? Muscle compensation shortens your muscle, and it's going to lead to instability. It's going to lead to not getting that full range of motion when you're trying to mobilize things. So I would say that the biggest benefit, and I can give you guys some tips as far as, when it's best to stretch. Lance mentioned like hot yoga and stuff like that as things that are going to help to obviously boost your temperature and things like that. Would that be good on a rest day? Maybe not necessarily, but on a day where you're trying to mobilize your joints, introducing something like heat might actually be a good idea. Now, how much heat? Well, you got to build a tolerance for that. But I would say that in a nutshell, those are probably the biggest benefits, is realigning and smoothing out those muscles so that they can function optimally when you need them to.
Definitely sounds like there's a need to understand too, like, to interpret the way the muscles feel. And I know, like, a lot of us have gone through both cycles where we misinterpret soreness as pain and pain as soreness. I mean, personally, when I was a youngin', we lost Devin. What happened, Devin?
You did that on purpose.
Why'd you do that?
I didn't do that. I got kicked off.
Oh,
my connect.
Well, we're about to kick you off again. You messed up my flow, kid. I had a soreness in my shoulder that felt like an ice pick going through the front to the back, and I was sure, like, I'm just sore, I just need to work through that. 7 anchors later, it turns out that was pain, and now I'm probably on the other side where it's like, oh no, that DOMS has to be like a ripped quad. I need to take a month off. How do we interpret, like, what are some ways that we can start to understand the difference between, if there is a way, between understanding pain versus soreness, and what to do for each?
Sure. So kind of like you mentioned, Lance, sometimes it's very difficult to decipher, is this just soreness or is this injury? And one of the things is obviously time. So delayed onset muscle soreness usually should be peaking around 48 to 72 hours, but it could last as long as 4 or 5 days. Now, if we get outside of that time realm, one of the things that I like to talk with my patients in my office quite a bit is going to be the green light, yellow light, red light theory. So green light is, oh man, I had a hard workout. Okay, I'm going to start warming up. I'm going to do handstand holds. Okay, yeah, that feels pretty good. All right, Green light, probably just a little bit sore. Yellow light is, oh, I can feel that. Okay, well, let's do another handstand hold. I can still feel it. Is it getting worse? No, it's not getting worse. Okay, yellow light, we're probably not putting ourselves in a danger zone. Red light is going to be, hey, you know what? The third set felt worse than the first and second, or the 12th rep felt different than the first and second. That's red light. I want to take a step away from that. And then at that point, maybe put it on the timeline. Okay, how long has this been bothering me? Well, I did that workout 4 days ago. It was really hard. I really did beat the heck out of my shoulders. Okay, it could still be delayed onset muscle soreness, but adhering to that green light, yellow light, red light. If you're doing something, and the amount of times that I have people come in my office that say, you know, when I'm doing this movement, I can feel it. I can feel it is A-okay. I am okay with I can feel it. It's getting worse with each rep, with each set. That's more injury talk. And that's where chatting with someone like, you know, Coach Devin, Lucia, or myself would be beneficial.
Yeah.
Anything?
I would probably also add that if your pain is, or if you're not able to differentiate between soreness and pain, right? If what you're feeling is relieved with stretching, if what you're feeling is relieved by small little movements, nothing major, but small little movements, then you know you're kind of like Dino was expressing, you're in that green zone or maybe the yellow zone, right? But if you notice that what you're feeling is getting worse, right? And you're finding that maybe the application of ice or like rest are the only things that are making it better, then that might be an indication that you kind of pushed it too far. Keep an eye on it. And that would be an indication of more and more rest days.
Gotcha.
Not active recoveries.
We're not really good at paying attention to things beforehand, but is there a way to start to become in tune with your body so it doesn't get to that point? So you can start to see like the pre-shocks, not the 5.4 like we had on Saturday night.
Yeah. It's something that takes practice, right? Because as athletes, we're driven by competition, especially like I was not much of a competitor in yoga, obviously, right? How are you going to compete in yoga? I mean, there are competitions, but it wasn't until I started getting into CrossFit with Coach Devin that I was like, oh shit, there's a whiteboard and like my score is going to go up there. Wait, what's RX? I want to do that. Like, how do I get there? And so is with Coach Devin that he got me to that point. And so it's really, really hard. And I can say this because of my own experience, to listen to your body when you're goal oriented, right? When you're competitive, maybe not only with yourself, but with others as this community competition. And so listen to your body. And I know that sounds cheesy and I know that sounds very yogish, but you have to listen to your body. It gets better, right? The more that you practice this, just like anything else, the better that you become. Lance, I think you're right when you say you got to listen to those little small pains before they become bigger pains, right? And if you can start familiarizing yourself with tapping into your intuition, we all, I know to get a little cheesy here, but we are intuitive beings, right? And so sometimes for the sake of reaching and achieving a goal, especially in Silicon Valley, because it's, you know, go, go, go time, if you can just slow down for a moment, and that's where a practice like yoga really comes in handy, you start familiarizing yourself with the language of your own body, which is going to be different than the language of somebody else's body, right? So do an inventory of your body. Something that we do in yoga oftentimes at the end is Shavasana, my favorite pose. And that's where you do a complete scan of your body. You're like, how do I feel right now? And oftentimes you close your eyes so that you're not distracted by the sound of the dog or the children, you know, laughing in the corner or whatever, the car driving by. Like, close your eyes, scan your body, address the little pains and symptoms right away. Don't brush it off. We're not procrastinators, because we wouldn't be athletes in CrossFit if we were procrastinators. So don't procrastinate with the signs and the symptoms. You're going to recover faster and you're not going to regret it. So resolve it right away.
Got you. Just to give you guys a heads up, as I know you know our order, I'm going to go out of order on the next one because it goes so well. There was a specific question that was, my doctor told me to take time off since my shoulder injury to recover. What should I do?
Yeah, so this is a fun one, Lance, because this is something where you're doctor's personal experience might interfere with their advice to you a little
And
bit.
they do Orange Theory, just to let you know. That's their background.
That's the provider, the doctor's
Oh
background.
yeah, that's so they
Gotcha.
don't know anything.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's important to kind of, when it comes to these types of injuries, to understand that your doctor might not necessarily understand your goals. They might not understand your experience. They might not understand exactly what CrossFit is. One of my favorite types of athletes to work with specifically is CrossFit athletes, because with CrossFit, my goodness, there are so many modifications that you can do. You can do kettlebells instead of barbell. You could do body weight aside from Olympic weight. You could, vice versa. I'll never forget, and Coach Dev and Lucia probably remember this. We had one year that there were two gentlemen. They were in our masters club, let's say, and they were ambitious CrossFitters. And boy, they were such a great example of, my doctor told me to take time off, but he didn't understand what I do. We had two gentlemen simultaneously who had quadriceps tendon tears. So they had a full leg immobilizing brace. Their leg wasn't allowed to do this. When they could walk with one and peg leg with the other. And they came to CrossFit 5-6 days a week. Were they doing squats, box jumps, and ollie lifts? No. But they talked to people like Coach Dev who made modifications, and someone who understands exactly what their goals are. And knowing that it's not, when you're injured, your doctor's job is to cover their own ass a lot of times. To protect themselves. So if they say, well, I had Lance and he had shoulder surgery, and I said it's A-okay to go to CrossFit, but your doctor doesn't understand what all you're doing at CrossFit, and then you go and injure yourself, guess who looks bad? The provider. So it's important to really make sure that your provider is doing the best to make sure that you don't re-injure yourself. But sometimes, in some cases, that provider doesn't really understand what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and they're not able to give you the appropriate modifications. And that's where the benefit of, working with someone like myself or someone like Lucia, a lot of times we will refer back to Coach Dev and say, hey, I saw such and such. Yeah, their shoulder not looking so good. We're going to get their legs real strong for the next few months. Even today, we had an example. Coach Dev had a client who was sent over to me and was having some issues. We were both kind of scratching our heads. We took an x-ray, and hey, we got our answer. We know why that person is having some pain and problems. And now we're able to co-manage it back and forth. And guess what? At no point at all in the co-management have we told that client to take a day off. Not one.
And I will actually, as director of operations for a medical practice as my full-time job, I will say that CYA is built into every treatment plan that we make. Literally, like, their job is to cover their ass. Their job is to make sure that we minimize risks and liabilities whenever possible, so it doesn't come back to haunt us. I am responsible for those claims. So I know what Dino is speaking about. And at the end of the day, like Dino said, you suffer an injury, they don't know what it's like to be an athlete. Half of these doctors don't know shit about nutrition. And I can say this with conviction because I've worked for many of them for 18 years. They don't know the slightest about, they come to me and will say, hey, Lucia, what stretch should I do for my hamstring? And I'm like, you're a physician. Like, don't you know the way the hamstring works? But they know medicine. And I love working with physicians, but I also respect the fact that that is their specialty. And when somebody tells you, don't do this for 4 months, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, or at least question them, or maybe get a second opinion, right? Because sometimes somebody who's on your frequency, who's kind of resonating at your level, may have some different input for you. So, yeah.
Got you. Thank you. Hey, also, I want to do a quick reminder of people who are watching. If you do have anything that's coming up and you think like, oh my God, I want a follow-up question, shoot it in the chat as well. And if I can work it in, if not, we'll have that time at the end. One of the questions that comes up a lot is, and especially in like this workforce, is how much does sleep relate to recovery? What happens when I sleep? Do I need it? Is it for the week?
Sleep is definitely for the week.
Cool.
I'm just kidding.
Next question.
Next question. We're done with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you sleep, you're weak. No, but one thing that I think about whenever I think of sleep, and I'm sure many of you guys have heard of it, sleep debt. It's a thing, right? You accumulate money, you put it in your savings account, and it's the same thing with your sleep, right? So if you're sleep deprived one night, and then the next night, and then the next night, but hey, maybe you have one night where you sleep for 8 hours, that doesn't mean you're caught up, right? You're non-REM. So two different, we'll talk about it super briefly. So there's a REM cycle, right? When you're sleeping, and it's that rapid eye movement cycle of your sleep. It's the non-REM cycle that allows for what a lot of people coin like deep sleep, right? And it's in this cycle of sleep where there's muscle recovery, where there's restoring of all the bodily functions, and the organs have this time to kind of like reset, regroup for the next day. If you deprive yourself of sleep, you're depriving yourself of oxygen and nutrients from flowing in your body. You're depriving yourself of these natural shots of growth hormone that can actually help you to stimulate your tissue growth, which is, I mean, why I came to CrossFit. I was a skinny little rail, and I was like, I want muscle, right? But if you're not sleeping, you're not going to get your muscle. You're not going to get the gains that you're chasing. So if you can sleep 8 hours of sleep, then your central nervous system is super happy. You're going to recover much faster, and you're going to come back much, much stronger to your workouts. And I do have some tips on how to improve your sleep, but I'll wait until the end if there's time for that. There's like a list of like 10 things that I always recommend to people.
Cool. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? All right, then I will ask the hard-hitting question. Looks like I'm early 30s, but I am not. So how does age affect my recovery needs? Because I swear to God, once I hit 41, everything just kind of went out the window. Go ahead, don't be shy. You're not going to offend me. You might offend someone in the audience. Old people, how do they need more recovery, less recovery? Does it change? Do they just need more of it, or do they need different types of it?
What would you say, Dino?
Well, it all age is really tough to say that because you hit such and such age, you are doomed. Now, the likelihood that you're going to need to spend more time working on your recovery as you age, yeah, you're probably going to need more time to recover. That being said, I think to reel it back in, I think what we motion sense
wave with you.
I think what's super important is to keep in mind that it's more about progression, I would say, than it is age, because there's plenty of athletes that are in their 40s or 50s that they can work hard, 6 workouts a week. But guess what? They've been doing CrossFit for the past 10 years. They don't skip a day. They're there for their Saturday 7 a.m. comp classes, and they have conditioned their body to being able to do that. Now, with that being said, if you're someone who is just getting into CrossFit and you're in your 40s, 50s, then absolutely, yeah, you're going to need at least 2 days of, I would say, good rest just to get yourself started. But progressing into things, that CrossFit's a hard one because there's so many different exercises and so many different types of workouts, and some are longer workouts, some are shorter, more intense workouts. So the amount of rest and recovery you're going to need age-wide is going to be on a very, wow, why does this keep happening? Is going to be on a very sliding scale. But yes, you're generally speaking going to need more with age. But again, that being said, someone who's 25, and I think this is important to touch on, someone who's 25 who looks at the guy next to him that's 55, who looks to his left and sees the 65-year-old woman, and they're pushing hard, and they were just there yesterday, and they're walking in like, oh, my legs don't feel so good. Hey, how are you guys feeling? You're fine? Yeah, I'm fine too. They haven't put the hours into the gym to be able to progress, to be able to keep up with those athletes. So maybe Lucia could dive in a little bit more than that, but I would certainly say that, age is going to be a factor, and you're generally speaking, you're going to have as we age, we're going to have to spend more time recovering, but progression is going to be the key to how much recovery you need to spend and how much time you need to spend on recovery. Someone else got the motion sensors going too.
I think what we're touching on, Dino, is consistency, right? If somebody has been consistent in their practice, I get this, I can't even tell you, with new students, new yoga students, every time. Well, should I be doing yoga? Because I'm not really flexible. And I'm like, in order to gain flexibility, in order to gain mobility, like you've got to start somewhere. But they look over to the right and they see the girl doing the freaking splits over here. And then they look over to the left and they see the girl touching her head to her foot. And they're like, oh my God, like I can't do this. So I always tell people, pay attention to the four corners of your mat. Don't look to the right unless you're just looking for inspiration, but not inspiration that you're going to chase, because you're going to get hurt. Like this is your first class. And that's why at the start of every class, and Devin's my witness, he's taken my classes. Anybody new to yoga? And I say it with enthusiasm because I don't want them to be shy. I need to know, right, for their safety. And so it's important to know where you stand. And if you have a consistent practice, whether it's yoga or whether it's CrossFit, you're going to have a consistent recovery schedule because you've already realized the benefit of that. And so I think that the two kind of go hand in hand. As hard as you work, you should be recovering. And if you work a little less, maybe you recover less, right? So the two should kind of go in tandem and kind of parallel paths as you progress, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next, good, bad, or indifferent. What's the role of nutrition to recovery? Like, what do we need to know to help out recovery? What do we need to know to not stand in the way of recovery?
Can I just kind of can I tell you guys a funny little thing that happened when I first started CrossFit?
Only if it's really funny.
And it ties to nutrition. So when I first came to CrossFit, Coach Devin, I was intimidated as F. I was like, okay, I'm like 110 pounds. I'm a vegetarian. I hear you have to eat meat if you're going to do CrossFit. I don't really fit in. Like I'm getting looks like, oh, all you have is just an empty barbell. Like I didn't really fit in. And I always thought that in order to do CrossFit, you had to eat meat. You had to have a paleo diet. You had to like have a certain lifestyle. What happened was having a very vegetarian focused diet. I did for 12 years. I did that. I feel that there is no secret nutritional lifestyle when you're an athlete. For some people, they can, I mean, you've seen them, the vegan athletes that are insane, but they do the work. There's consistency with what they're putting into their body. There's planning. It's not just, oh, let me eat some lettuce and let me eat some carrots and then that's it, right? As a vegetarian, I always made sure that I balanced complete proteins. And when it wasn't complete, I would make them complete by combining certain protein powders, for example. And now as a meat club member, I literally get Texas meat delivered to my house every month. So I've gone like the full spectrum all the way over. I still weigh the same. I'm still able to lift the same. So that hasn't changed, right? And when you have your certain belief systems that you hold true, I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong way when it comes to nutrition, as long as my golden rule, less processed food. That's it. As much whole food as possible, not even raw food necessarily, but as much whole foods as possible, as little processed food and as little fast food, maybe none at all, if that's possible. Yeah. But Devin, however, probably has a lot more scientific data to share.
Well, now that I'm back and my connection seems to be stable, thank God. Yeah, I mean, obviously nutrition's pretty closely related to everything we do. I mean, whatever you put in your body is going to have a direct effect on pretty much everything that goes on with inside you. But yeah, I mean, if you are not fueling yourself properly from just purely a calories in, calories out kind of energy balance standpoint, you're not going to recover as well. If you're on a highly restricted diet, that'll affect your rate of recovery, how well you recover. So those things are just kind of a little bit like more basic, but always good to keep in mind, because if you are, say, trying to lose weight, you can, if you're restricting yourself, if you restrict too much, it can actually have some adverse effects on your recovery, and it also will have some adverse effects on your gains, your adaptations as well. So you want to make sure you're fueling yourself for the tasks that you're doing, and if you are in fact trying to lose weight, then make sure that you're not trying to deficit yourself too much, because there's going to be such a thing as losing too much weight, and it will start to affect performance, recovery. Your body will really start to pull from like lean tissue, so we'll start to affect kind of like the lean mass amount and stuff like that. So, and then on more of the micro, supplying yourself with plenty of whole foods, getting a wide spectrum of vegetables, fruits, lean meats, and good fats. You want to try to be well-rounded in order to get the best result from your recovery. That also helps fuel things like the microbiome, make sure that you're supporting your good bacteria, which actually can be quite beneficial in supporting the immune system and that recovery response. Those things are all super important. So, good general rules that Lucia gave out, try to avoid processed foods. Hopefully for most of us, that goes without saying. But a little bit, I think is okay, but you just got to be trying to exercise a little more restraint there. But wholesome foods is going to be, a big part of that. Try to eat as wholesome as possible. Try to have variety. And yeah, you will notice that your performance, your recovery will start to benefit. Things like inflammation, joint pain might start to reduce and kind of benefit from that. So, there's a lot to be said about good nutrition and how it can affect your overall recovery, rate of recovery, quality of recovery. So
don't get all of your calories from just booze, huh?
Speaking of
probably
that, speaking of that, does alcohol? Okay, so you hear both sides, right? You hear like wine helps inflammation, and alcohol causes inflammation. Yeah. Is there what's the deal with alcohol and how does it affect recovery? Because a lot of us want our cheat days to be on our rest days, right?
Yes.
No one goes out for a cheat day on their double day. So how does it affect recovery?
Well, certainly can affect recovery. I think moderation, the amount that you're consuming, is going to be a big factor. In general, alcohol consumption can certainly depress a lot of your body's recovery processes and kind of slow that part of things down. It will depress the immune system a little bit as well. If you are there, well, there are some instances where I've actually had it. I've observed it to help, but it's not necessarily for the reasons that you would think. Like Boris actually was kind of a good example of that, because he was always a very heavy drinker. And when he actually started taking drinking out of his diet, his performance started going down. But I thought it was more due to like caloric deficit and not actually getting enough calories to supplement for the loss of calories from the alcohol. So in that sense, it was actually kind of fueling him to some degree. I would not use that as a way to advise or, try to follow that guideline, but it's just kind of interesting to point that out. But in general, yeah, I mean, you want to minimize the alcohol consumption. It will have an effect. It's going to affect performance as well. So if you're trying to get the most out of your workouts, it's going to slow you down. It's going to affect your cognitive abilities, your coordination. So you're going to, arguably affect your gains as well from that. Everyone's response is going to be a little bit different. Maybe you can handle a beer the night before and be totally fine. So I think the amount that you do consume will play a small part into that. But, erring on the side of caution, I would, try to minimize that and exercise some sort of moderation, especially if your cheat day is a big drinking day. You also got to think about overall calories that are being consumed too, because if you're trying to lose weight and trying to be in a deficit, if you're, for example, IPA drinker, it might take only but like 3 or 4 IPAs before you're in the 750 to 1,000 calories, consumed already. So those are things that you also want to take into account as well. So
I like to think like if you're trying to burn fat because you want to be more lean or you're trying to build muscle, then you probably don't want to drink as much alcohol, right? Because then otherwise your body's using that as fuel and it's not burning the fat. So just in really simple terms, that's how I think about it. And some days I'm like, you know what? F it. I want a beer. And so I drink a beer. So I think you can't really be too hard on yourself. And if you don't reward yourself, then what's there to look forward to in life? Like you have to reward yourself with what you like every now and then, because otherwise I feel like it's just torturous. And also your cortisol levels increase with booze. So keeping that in mind and understanding that spike will make your body feel more stressed, which will make you sleep maybe not so good, which if you don't sleep good, we've now learned you might not recover as quickly. If you don't recover as quickly, you can get injured, so it's just kind of like a chain reaction. But like Devin said, Coach Devin, I think moderation is probably all right.
Is it better to go for it, Dino?
Oh, I was just going to say, understanding your relationship with alcohol too. Why are you having that beer? Why are you having that glass of wine? Why are you having that bottle of wine? Why are you having those 3 bottles of wine? Are you having it because for me, an IPA beer tastes like Friday after work. I love it. That is okay. I made it through the week. This is like Lucia, like Coach Dev mentioned, this is my reward. I earned it. Now, if I'm going to have a 30 pack because I had a brutal week, now I'm just throwing salt into the wound, right? Because I'm stressed out. So now I'm throwing inflammation. I'm throwing calories. I'm throwing a hangover into the mix. So I have no problem with alcohol. Again, to me, that's the on my week is when I crack that first beer, just the instant pressure relief. I feel better. I earned it. The weekend is here. So I would say, obviously moderation is important, but understanding why you're drinking alcohol and why you're drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, if that happens to be the case.
Good point.
Yes, identifying relationships can always give you a deeper understanding, right, as to what's going on.
Also, relationships with people can affect recovery.
We're now. Which recovery are we talking about now? It does lead to a question though. It's like a lot. Like I said before, a lot of us try to coordinate our cheat days with our rest days, and I mean, does it make a difference? Like maybe is it better to put our cheat days, especially if it involves alcohol, on a non-rest day? Does it matter? I mean, is it going to affect you the same, or is recovery like?
You could argue, I might argue, that it could be better suited on a workout day, but like post-workout, because you are in a state where your body does need some of this energy, the calories that are going to be consumed through a beverage. Again, I'm not necessarily advocating for that as like a protocol that you employ. But yeah, your body to some degree needs that. So there are some advantages to timing the intake to when your body needs it, because it will affect how your body stores that energy. When you are post-workout, for example, that's kind of the big thing why people subscribe to having like kind of sugar intake or like a Gatorade, like a sugary, liquid type of drink, because your body needs to replenish glycogen stores. So if you are going to do it, doing it post-workout does it allows your body to have more of a chance to store it for energy the next day. Not to say it's going to be the best quality energy if it's coming directly from alcohol, but again, it's not going to necessarily maybe store it as fat right away, unless there's just excess energy that's already been, everything that it needs has been taken. Everything else then will get stored as fat, and then obviously if you're drinking on a rest day, going into a workout day, it's probably going to affect your performance the next day, right? So if you were to say consume alcohol on a workout day going into a rest day, then you have that extra day to actually kind of like normalize, reach homeostasis again, and probably have a little bit better chance of having a successful training day the next day. But again, not advocating for a lot of alcohol drinking, but if you were to actually think about it, the logical way to structure it into your training, that's how I would do it actually. So personally.
And definitely not
one or two drinks. That's it.
Not intra workout, correct?
Yes, not during your workout.
Okay. So we had a question written down about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems and how it relates to recovery. We have 10 minutes. And no, you can't, but I can do it now. Yeah. There we go. Good. We have a question from the audience that I feel like takes precedent. It says, I know we've been talking about listening to your body in regards to active rest days, active recovery and rest days, but is it possible to work out 7 days a week if your body feels fine and if you are not pushing each workout 100% to the max?
Good
Is
question.
it the same kind of workout?
We're CrossFitters, yo. Like, never the same.
Hey, it's just a question.
No, I'm kidding. I'm gonna. It's
because I know that
questions from Michelle. So
Michelle, even in CrossFit, there are days where, unless, I mean, it's been a while, I haven't CrossFitted in a while, but like WOD days where it was just the WOD, you're not really touching like heavy weight, you're not doing like the Olympic weightlifting. So are we talking like combination of like some WOD days, doing more of the agility, doing more like double unders, doing more runs and things like that, which are going to help boost like cardiovascular endurance? Or are we talking like Olympic weightlifting 7 days a week?
Oh no, so I'm just talking about a mix of everything. So we're, you know, you're doing some gymnastics one day, you're doing some lifting some days. I'm just not sure when to rest and when not to rest. I mean, my body feels fine. You know, I feel like before, I mean, I do double days, 3 days a week. I do the CrossFit classes on Sunday. You know, I mean, I do a lot of classes, but if I feel fine doing a class on my rest days as well, I just don't know, honestly.
I would say it sounds like it's very, your workout is very varied, right? There's a lot of variety to your workout, because when you're doing something like gymnastics, and that Coach Devin knows, those are like my favorite. I love the handstand push-ups. Like I love all the gymnastic stuff. And I don't really equate CrossFit Olympic weightlifting as the same workout as like a more gymnastics focused workout with rings and like ring dips and ring rows and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, like Dino was saying, right? You know your body better than anybody. So if you told a doctor, hey, I'm working out 7 days a week in CrossFit, what do you think? The doctor's going to be like, yo, lady, you're crazy. You should not be doing that. You're out of your mind. But you know your body and you're an intuitive person and it feels okay for you. And I feel like if you felt otherwise, you would be intelligent enough to listen to your body and to rest, but it doesn't sound like your body's giving you that information. So I would say it's probably okay. Dino?
Yeah, I agree completely. So when it comes to like statistics and like research speaking, Michelle, I would still advise that you have at least 2 days a week where whatever workout you're doing, it's going to be somewhere between 50% to maybe 70% of what you would normally do. So if it's a gymnastics day, what to you does like a normal gymnastics or body weight workout? Your rest and recovery days, you can totally do that, but I would just bring either the duration or the intensity of that workout, cut it in half and at a maximum 2/3. I mean, you would be very hard pressed to find any high level athlete who's going to take, 2 full days off and do nothing. But they've worked their way up to it. They've spent years, they've spent hours kind of conditioning their bodies to be able to do that. And heck yeah, if you feel good, get your butt out there and do some exercise. But I would strongly recommend that at least 2 out of 7 days a week, you're cutting that in half. Cut it in half, and at the most 2/3 of what you would normally like to do, whether it's duration of the workout or how much weight you're using.
I can add a couple things to that though, just to keep in mind, because I do think it's fine if you're varying intensities and managing through like high days and low days, moderate days and stuff like that. But again, it does come down to kind of understanding the inner workings and how that goes, because sometimes I think what people perceive to be light, again, still might be a little more than light. And and gymnastics is actually a great example, because when you look at gymnastics, okay, you're not touching a weight, but say you take me, I'm someone who weighs like 215 pounds or so. My body and the stress that's going to go through per handstand push-up or dip is going to be way more than someone that's say 150 pounds and weighs like 65 pounds less than me. So there's going to be some things to still keep in mind in terms on an individual level. The only other thing I do want to point out from more of like a sciencey perspective that I think it's good to understand how your body recovers and adapts is that your body will always devote time or resources to recovery first. So if you're trying to push adaptations further, but you're continuing to exercise, just understand your body's going to recover before it starts to put more of that energy and resource into its adaptations. So while you still feel like you're getting a good workout, you're working out well and you're feeling fine, you could be kind of blunting or slowing the adaptation process though, because now your body's dividing resources between, exercise and recovery and then adaptation. So adaptations do require energy in order to take place. So like when your muscle is hypertrophizing and getting larger, or when there's literally like structural changes being made to the muscle cell and things like that, all of that stuff requires energy and is not free. So just think of that too, because I would argue that taking a full rest day will drive your adaptations and the rate of adaptations a little quicker. So again, it just depends on what you're doing. If those light days are, pretty light, and maybe they're actually having some benefit of adding skill work or mobility work at the same time, which will fuel your progress, I think those things can definitely be done well. But, in erring on the side of caution, that's why I just tell people, for the most part, like, take a rest day. If you're thinking, should it be light? Should it be an active rest day? Like, just rest. You're most likely going to get a lot of benefit from just resting in terms of pushing progress forward. But that's just what I've learned and through my experiences. But play around with it. Everyone's different, so it's just good to try both things. If you've been doing 7 days a week constantly, try taking it 2 solid days off a week and see what happens, see how your body responds. It's certainly not going to, it's not going to be a negative by doing that if you're training 5 days a week. So experiment.
That is an amazing segue into our last question of what happens when we don't recover. Obviously, you're talking about the limitation of adaptation. Are there other things that happen if we don't take the time? Let's say we are redlining 7 days a week and we're like, recovery is for when I die.
Yeah. Well, there's this thing that I'm sure many of you guys have heard of. It's called OTS, or overtraining syndrome. I've been a victim. I'm sure we all have. And it's where your body's own intelligent response to excessive exercise, when you don't get enough rest, or when you don't have enough active recovery built into your lifestyle, you distress the body. And you don't just distress the physical body, but sometimes like the mental body, which in yoga, of course, I'm going to always go back to yoga, there's this mind-body connection, right? So when you distress one, obviously everything else is going to be affected. Your endocrine system is going to be affected. Your neurological system is going to be affected. Right now, having a healthy immune system is more important than ever. And when you don't recover, you can affect the immune response that your body naturally would have and naturally be able to develop when you rest, right? Further develop. Another thing that sometimes we don't think about, but when we don't recover, we get moody. I don't know about you guys, but I get moody. Like and sometimes my boyfriend will be like, dude, what's your deal? And I was like, dude, I worked out all week and I just don't think I've like rested enough. So sometimes you get moody. You obviously are increasing your chance of injury, right? And nobody here wants to be injured. That's not why we're doing this. When I mentioned the endocrine system, when you're constantly doing these high intensity exercises, your body, which sometimes you've heard of, adrenal fatigue is going to be something that develops, right? And when you have this lifestyle in Silicon Valley, where many of you guys are working pretty intense jobs, right? You're in this rat race, like in the middle of it. You don't give your mind, your body chance to rest. Your endocrine system is going to be affected. You're going to have the opposite effect of what you're trying to accomplish when you work out. Your sleep is going to suffer, right? When you're not recovering, your sleep is going to be affected. And we've all discussed how that can affect your overall recovery and athletic performance. When you go too hard, your muscles obviously aren't going to be able to recover. And that has a direct effect and correlation with your immune system, like I've already talked about. And then your performance, right? If you don't give your body the time that it deserves to recover, whether that's an active recovery or whether it's a full-on rest day, you're going to come back still feeling slightly fatigued. You will notice that in your performance, it's going to suffer, right? So until you give yourself that breather, until you give yourself this ability to reach homeostasis, like we've talked about, you're not going to come back really feeling like you can give it 100%. And in CrossFit, what's the point of going to CrossFit if you can't go 100% for how you feel that day, right? And maybe you're 100% on one day, might be 80%, but you won't even hit that if you haven't rested. So yeah, from my standpoint, that's what I think happens when you don't recover.
Gotcha. It is 7:31, and I want to give everyone a minute to kind of give like a little concluder on their summation of what people should be taking away from this. And let's start with the guy who started it, Dino, and then we'll go to Lucia and then finish off with Devin.
Yeah, so I would say, just kind of in conclusion, one of the most important things is sitting back and taking a look at what your goals are. I have no idea. Maybe some of you want to go to the CrossFit Games one day. Maybe some of you, like myself, just want to be as fit as we can be and age gracefully. If you're beating your body up and you're injuring yourself and you're stressed out and you're just tired all the time, you've defeated the purpose that you started this journey on the first place. So take a second and really kind of think about what it was that got you into CrossFit in the first place. What are your current goals? And listen to your body day by day, because the more stress you put on your body, once again, you really have to start emphasizing that recovery. If you're not doing those, you're probably not going to reach those goals that you set out to pursue in the first place. And what's all the hard work for if we're just stressing ourselves out?
Yep.
Oh, thanks, Dino. Lucia?
I've got 3 takeaways. Number 1, hug someone that's in your little cohort, because you release oxytocin and that's going to boost your mood and lower your stress levels. Number 2, laugh. Sometimes life can feel really freaking serious, especially in 2020 and leading into these crazy political situations that we find ourselves in. Laugh. Make time to laugh. The third takeaway is this. Obviously, as a yoga instructor, we believe in pranayama, breath work, diaphragmatic breathing. So I would challenge you to experiment maybe with breathing in and out of your nose. And I then would challenge you, if that is successful, try to apply a little piece of paper tape on your mouth and go to sleep with that. Maybe it's just a nap to start, right? And progress your way into like overnight sleeping with your mouth closed. Those are my 3 takeaways for you.
Cool. And just to support her number 2, I teach Monday at noon, Thursday morning, Friday evening.
For laughter?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Exactly. Devin?
Yeah, going back to what Dino said, definitely can't stress enough the importance of understanding your why, and why you're doing this stuff. I think when you have an idea of what that is, that's going to help guide you in terms of figuring out how you're going to prioritize these things. But, if you want to be healthy, if you want to be fit and want to be a high performing athlete, it doesn't really matter. You've got to devote some time to recovery. The amount of work you do will obviously depend on how much recovery you're going to put into it. But yeah, I think everyone's going to benefit both from a mental and physical standpoint. And in times like this, when times are super stressful with the pandemic going on, it's even more important because we're just so chronically in a heightened state. Talking about parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, we're always in that fight or flight mode. So anything we can do to start dialing it back, get back into that more kind of calm and relaxed mode, it's going to help our ability to recover mentally as well as physically. So
Rest in
devote some time, treat yourself, and be nice to others.
Yeah. Golden rule.
Cool. Well, that is it. I know that this crew was equally eager to follow up with anyone and possibly even have a part 2. Maybe once we have the basics of getting a little deeper and a little more specific. I know a lot of times people want that answer, like limit salt, have red wine instead of vodka, and everything will be okay. But I think what we're finding is that it isn't like that, and it's probably getting to know yourself first. I remind you guys, ask a coach. I think Michelle brings up a good question about what is overtraining and training, and sometimes it's just taking guidance, and you guys are doing very well. One of the benefits of this system is if you do end up seeing someone like a Dino or Lucia, is we can always video the session. You can take video clips of these classes as well so that they can see how you're moving. And I will say that this will be recorded. It will be indexed and up on the interwebs. We'll put it up on the Facebook page, along with the contact information for Lucia and Dino, so that if you have follow-up questions or want to, suss out what their services are and how they can help you be a bigger, better badass. That's why we're here. We value a lot of what they say. We've dealt with them for quite a while. Devin can speak scores to Dino. I can talk about Lucia. Just amazing, amazing people. And we really recommend that if you have questions that weren't answered here, realize that they know a hell of a lot more than these 66 minutes went over. So
I will also, Lance, send you my YouTube channel, which is totally 100% free for anybody who wants it. I've got yoga on there. I've got all kinds of stuff on there, like full on videos that I get paid to teach, but I just record them and upload them to YouTube. So if you guys ever like, what would a yoga class feel like? Just do it at home, put it on your YouTube, on your phone, on your computer. It's free. Share it with whoever. I'm not looking to make a profit. I have a full-time job, but I will send you guys that resource, Lance, so that if you want to share it with your members, it's available and it's fun.
Cool.
I get good feedback.
They're challenging.
Yeah.
Not all of them. Devin, don't scare them. Stop.
Anytime you've told me a workout was going to be easy, it was still not easy, or a class. Not that that's bad.
Try the gentles. Start with the gentles, my friends. Start with the gentles.
I muted you, Devin.
Yeah, you did.
This big frame. I just carry a lot of extra weight. It's more work.
So at this point, I'm going to stop recording. If people have to get going, they can get going. I'm going to be here for a few seconds just to uncomfortably wait